Trustworthiness has been an important topic as long as the earth has rotated. Trust built families, that built communities, that built societies, that built nations. Without trust, the bedrock of society would collapse and modern life along with it. How has trust, or the lack thereof, shaped humanity's way of life? How does it affect us in the present? And how different would the world be without it? Trust affects everything about the past. An example of trust in action is NATO. Started in 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization is an intergovernmental organization devoted to the safety and well-being of its member states. Joining NATO, while having many benefits, requires an extreme amount of trust in all of the countries of the organization. If those original 12 countries didn't trust each other, none of them would have been willing to sign a treaty they knew no other country would uphold, much less create a whole organization based off of it. If there was no trust, those 20 additional member states added after 1949 would not have joined because the treaty would have shown itself to be ineffective and there would be no North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Conversely, a lack of trust can also display trustworthiness' supreme importance in shaping the past. An example of this is the formation of the United States of America. Those British citizens who had traveled across the Atlantic to start a new life slowly lost trust in their government overseas. They received more taxes and less representation. Eventually, they no longer trusted that the king had their best interests at heart and took matters into their own hands. The creation of the United States of America was based off of a lack of trust, meaning that without that original trust, America would not exist today. If there had been no trust at the beginning, there would be no trust to lose and thus no incentive to rebel against the government and begin a whole new country. Arguably the best example of distrust in the past was the Cold War. In the mid to late 1900s, the Soviet Union and the United States of America were in tense conflict with one another. However, there was little to no actual fighting done. It was a war of ideals. These two countries had completely opposed viewpoints, resulting in tension and distrust between them. Each believed the other had the means and motive to create total devastation and were both simply waiting for their opportunity. The fear, the lack of trust, led to a major change in both Soviet and American societies. Schools started atomic bomb drills, and the government procured sites to test bomb effectiveness. These two countries were at brinkmanship. The act of pushing another country closer and closer to taking action, which could have been devastating if the action taken was nuclear. This is why trust is so important. It creates peace, fosters relationships, and allows the world to keep spinning. The Cold War ended about 30 years ago. However, the lack of trust continues on and perhaps has even grown since the war ended. Russia and America are now mortal enemies and want to eliminate one another. The only reason they haven't yet is mad or mutually assured destruction. These superpowers trust each other so little that the only reason they will not attack each other outright is that both countries and probably the world would be destroyed. Such a lack of basic trust has impacted these countries and the world in major ways. They have created proxy wars, political campaigns, and federal legislation in order to stay ahead of their enemy and remain number one. Democratic politics are also all based off of trust. Politicians, local and federal, are voted into office by the citizens of any given country. The population sees what the politician does, his track record of living up to his promises, and his political ads. They then decide if he has earned their trust and thus if he deserves to hold office. This is how democratic governments function, off of the trust of their voters. Without trust, democracy could not exist. Without trust, the government could not exist. Without trust, the world and life could not exist. If trust disappeared, modern life would disappear as well. How would the world change if tomorrow trust suddenly disappeared? First of all, people would lose trust in their families. There would be lots of fighting, disagreements, fear, and anger as the family turned on each other over everything. There is an endless list of things to accuse a family of due to the close relationship and constant interaction with one another. There would be no way to verify their innocence without proof, since no one would believe anyone else's words. There would be constant surveillance everywhere, watching every move to make sure no one takes something that isn't his or hers. Divorces would skyrocket, and children would be kicked out of a house. Secondly, people would lose trust in their politicians and governments. Revolts would happen all across the world as people attempt to leave government-regulated areas. The mayor might be trying to steal, the governor might be trying to exploit, the president might be trying to kill, not to mention what other countries are trying to do. Modern society would fall into chaos as governments started to distrust themselves and collapse under their own weight. Everyone would want to live isolated, away from everyone else, so they could attempt to live their lives without fear. But this wouldn't work. It wouldn't work because no one would trust themselves. To live, people must have some form of trust in themselves, or else they would never do anything. Constantly judging their own thoughts and actions is untrustworthy. Nothing would ever be accomplished again, as no one would trust themselves or their own ideas. The world would end, practically speaking, due to trust's fundamental role in society. Without trust, my life would certainly end due to trust's role in my life. It dictates everything I do, now and forever. Trustworthiness is the attribute I strive most to attain. If someone is trustworthy, he or she is also reliable, dependable, and typically well-liked. These are some of the most important character traits someone can have, and should be a medal of honor to all who attain them. Trust in someone takes significant time to build up, and only one mistake to knock down. So to say that someone is trusted by someone is to say that he or she has worked and worked and worked and succeeded in showing good character and strong morals. Of course, there are different kinds of trust. People do not often trust their coworkers in the same way as their friends, or their politicians in the same way as their families. In general, every form of trustworthiness is important for society to maintain, and each builds character. In the future, the level of trustworthiness I display will decide who and what I become. Striving to be an anesthesiologist, I recognize the extreme importance of trustworthiness throughout my chosen career. Medical school requires teachers to trust in me and my abilities. Working as an anesthesiologist requires hospital staff and patients to trust me, and I most certainly must trust myself and the knowledge that I have. I believe that if I do not work on and polish my trustworthiness, I will not go far in my career, and I will not like the untrustworthy, unreliable, and undependable person I become. Trustworthiness is the biggest factor between me and living my dream, and it will lead me to become the best version of myself possible. Trustworthiness is a bond, a reliance, and a relationship with another person, an illogical feeling of guaranteed safety despite circumstances. Trustworthiness is the building block of human development, the most fundamental part of society, and the reason we understand anything at all. Without trust, there would be no past, present, or future. Without trust, there would be no life. There is, always has been, and always will be the one most important factor of existence: trust.